Sketching graphs of linear equations, chapter 4, lesson 4. So we're going to be going a little backwards. In the past, we've had lines graph for us, and you had to figure out the slope and y-intercept. Here, you're going to actually be given some information and have to graph the line. All right, so sketching graphs when giving a table or the equation with a table of values. So in this example, we have the equation of y equals 1/3 x plus 4. It says use one grid square on both axes to represent one unit for the x interval from -3 to 3 and the y interval from 0 to 5. So that sounds a little confusing, but what they wanted you to do again is use three numbers that were between -3 and 3 in the x-axis. And then you'd plug those numbers into the equation, and I'll show you how. They said y equals 1/3. Then for the x, they put in -3 plus 4 to solve for y. So this would be -1 plus 4. So y equals -1 plus 4. So y equals 3, which is where they got -3. 3 is the point here. So for 0 and for +3, they then plugged in the 0 and the +3 for the x value and got the 4 and 5. So now we're just going to use these pairs as coordinates. So this right here is -3, +3 first set. Then we have 0 and 4 and 3 and 5. And then on the graph, they plotted those 3 points. So we always start at our origin. -3, +3 means I go to the left 3 and then up 3, and that's how they got this point. 0, 4, I'm starting back at the origin. Because it's 0, I'm not moving left or right, and we just go up 4, so that's this point. And then +3, +5, again, I'm starting at my origin. I go over 1, 2, 3, and then up that 5. And then typically they'd like you to use a ruler just to get your straight line, but for this one it's already written, but just connect your dots. We'll do an example together on the next slide. Okay, so they say graph the equation y equals 1/2 x minus 1. And they give us the x values in our table of -2, 0, and +2. So to figure out what the y values are, you have to put the x values they give in place. So I'll start with my first point and put y equals 1/2 times -2 minus 1. So first I do my multiplication, and that gives me -1. And I still have my -1. So -1 minus 1 equals -2. So my first point is -2, -2. My second point, I'm going to plug in the 0, 1/2 times 0 minus 1. Well, we know that anything times 0 is 0, so minus 1. So y equals -1. And last, I'll plug my 2 in. Y equals 1/2 times +2 minus 1. So I have y equals 1 minus 1. Y equals 0. So my 3 points are -2, -2, 0, -1, and 2, 0. So I'm going to plot those. Starting at my origin, go to the left 1, 2 spaces, and then down 2 for my first point. My second point, back at the origin, because my x is 0, I don't move left or right. I just go down to -1. And then my next point is +2, 0. So I'm going to my right 1, 2 spaces. And because my y is 0, I'm actually not going up or down. And then I'm just connecting my dots. So this would be the graph of the equation y equals 1/2 x minus 1. All right, let's do number 2 together. It says graph the linear equation by using 2 or more points. So you get to pick your points for these graphs, and I highly recommend anytime you get to pick your points, use 0 as an x, okay? It makes makes it really, really easy, and I'll show you why. So I'm just going to make my table of values. And all we really need, like I said, is 2 points to graph a line and make a straight line. So I'm always going to use 0 for my x for 1 because it's easy. And then anytime I have a fraction for my slope, I'm going to pick the denominator. We'll see y in a minute. So now I'm just going to plug those in to see what the y values are. So y equals 2/5 times 0 plus 2. Well, because we know that this equals 0, this just becomes y equals 2. That's why I always pick 0, because I really can just look at the y-intercept and have my automatic point of 0, 2. So now when I picked my denominator, this is why it's easy, because y equals 2/5 times 5 plus 2. Well, remember, anytime I multiply a fraction by its denominator, I'm left with the numerator. So y equals 2 plus 2, which of course we know is 4. So I have 2 points here. I have 0, 2, and 5, 4. They give you a blank grid because you could have picked any points you wanted. So I just want to draw a graph that's going to include all of my points. Since everything's positive, I'm going to kind of skew it over this way. My origin is right here. That's 0, 0. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So my first point is 0, 2. So I'm staying here and not moving left or right and just going up 2. So that's my first point. And my second point is 5, 4. So I go all the way over on the x-axis to my 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and wind up here and go up to 4. Draw my dot, and then connect my 2 dots. If you pick 2 other x's, you should wind up, if you do your math correctly, you're still going to wind up with the same line. Whatever points you pick will wind up on this line. So please give number 3 a shot. Again, I'm going to give you the points for x I want you to use, just again, to make it nice and simple. Of course, use 0, and because our denominator is 3, this time use 3. So come back and check your answer in just a moment. Okay, so here you should have got -4, and then for your x equals 3, you should have gotten a +1. So your 2 points are 0, -4, and 3, 1. So you got to kind of draw a graph here where you're going. I see my y's are more negative, so I'm going to kind of start where my origin is higher up. And then this is 1, 2, 3, 4. This would be -1, -2, -3, -4. I have +1 and +2 up here. So 0, -4. And sorry for my sloppiness there. But 0, -4 is right there. And then 3, 1 is here. So your line should have looked like that. All right, now you're going to use or draw a line using the slope and the y-intercept to graph the line. So our y-intercept, remember, is our b. So in our equation here, y equals 2x plus 3, your y-intercept is 3. So automatically, you know that one of the points on your line is going to be 0, 3. It's always going to be 0 on the x, and whatever your b is your y. So that's your first point. So you can automatically plot that 0, 3, which they started. And now you're using your slope, which is rise over run. So because we have a slope of 2 as a fraction, that's written as 2 over 1. So rise is how far it went up. So we can, and they made equivalent fractions here of 4 over 2 and 6 over 3. But we could do any 2 points here. We can start at our 0, 3, and we could have went up 1, 2 points. And then the run is how far left or right you go. And because it was 1, you see that point lands right there. They used 4, 2, so they went up 1, 2, 3, 4, and to the right 1, 2, and that's how they got 0.27. But this point of 1 and 5 also works. So, you could have, again, used 2, 7 like they showed, because they used the equivalent of 4 and 2. If you just want to use the actual slope, go right for it. You're still going to get a proper line. All right, so let's do this one together. Graph the equation y equals negative 1/2 x plus 3. So step 1 first is I'm going to use my y-intercept of b. So my b is 3. So again, my y-intercept, my x is always 0, and my y, or my b, is my y for that. So the first thing I'm going to do is plot 0, 3. I'm just kind of eyeballing a graph here, not making anything perfect. If you want to label your lines, you can. You don't always have to, because I'll just assume that everything is going to be, if it's not labeled, my assumption is that every line equals 1. So anyways, I'm plotting 0, 3. I'm starting at my origin. Because my x is 0, I stay on the origin. Because my y is 3, I go up 3. So that's my first point. Okay, so now I use the slope to find another point on the graph. Because the slope of the line is negative 1/2, the ratio of rise over 1 is 1 to negative 2. Okay, or negative 1 to 2. It doesn't matter. You could go either way. So I want to make some equivalent fractions here. Negative 1/2, I can multiply by 2 and get 2 over negative 4, or 3 over negative 6. So what that means now is I can find a new point. I'm going to start at 0, 3. Because my rise was 2, I'm going to go up. Oh, I didn't leave enough room for that. My apologies. I'm actually going to move down by 2 to start, because I'll get the same point. So I'll go 1, 2 down, and my run is over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So my new point here is positive 1, 4. So it didn't really matter which graph I made. I know that my slope is negative, so I want to be going down this way. So that's why I went down with my rise. I'm not sure why they did this. When your slope is negative, use your top number as negative. Okay, so they say use a ruler to draw. I will have them available in class for you. But that is the line of the graph for y equals negative 1/2 x plus 3. Okay, I want to do number 5 with you as well, because I know that was a little confusing with the negative slope. But step 1 is to find the y-intercept. So my y-intercept is 4. So I know my first point is 0, 4. Okay, so again, I'm just going to kind of eyeball a graph here and plot my first point of 0, 4. I am counting every line as 1, just so you know. So this is 0, 0. So 0, 4 is up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now my slope I see here is negative 1, because I have a negative x. So I'm going to turn that into a fraction of negative 1 over 1. And I can make some equivalents. Negative 2 over 2, negative 3 over 3. Any of those work. So I'm going to go back to my first point. So my rise, I'm going to go down. I'll do my 3s. I'll go down 3. 1, 2, 3. And then my run is a positive 3. So 1, 2, 3. And this is my new point. So to label this point, I have 1, 2, 3 here as my x, and a positive 1, because this is a positive 1, as my y. So we have points of 0, 4 and 3, 1. So this is the graph of the line y equals negative x plus 4. And my apologies, I forgot. Of course, a line, we have to connect our dots. All right, and lastly, you're going to graph lines given a point on the line and the slope. So this is a different point besides the y-intercept. So in this example, we have a slope of 3 and the point 1, 2 given. So the first step is always going to be to plot your first point. And they did that here for us, 1, 2. And then we're going to do what we did in our last example and use the slope as rise over run. Because it's a whole number, we turn it into a fraction as 3 over 1. You can make equivalent fractions and do 6/2 or 9/3. They decided to just use the rise over run of 3 over 1. So we started at our original point and we rose 3 points, 1, 2, 3. And then the run is a positive 1, so we moved over to the right one. And that new point is at 2, 5. So the new point is 2, 5, and then we connected the dots. So you'll see that this then is the graph of that line. Okay, number 6 and 7 I'll do with you. So graph a line with a slope of -1 that passes through the point -2, 3. So first we need to draw a graph and plot our first point. So this is -1, -2, and we have 1, 2, 3. So my first point of -2, 3, I'm going to the left 2 points and then up 3. So that's my first point. And now my slope is -1. So the rise over run ratio is -1 over 1. So -1 over 1 could be equivalent to -2 over 2, -3 over 3, -4 over 4. And it doesn't matter which one you use. Let's just do -4 over 4 because it'll spread out our lines a little bit. So we are going to start at our first point, and because our top number is negative, we go 1, 2, 3, 4 points down, and then our run is positive, so we go 1, 2, 3, 4 to the right. And this point, again, I'm counting from the origin, and I can see it's 1, 2 to the right, and 1 down. So we have a point of +2, -1. And then your last step would be to connect your dots. And I didn't use a ruler, so I was a little off. So one more to go. Give it a try on your own, number 7, and then come back and check to make sure your line matches up with mine. Okay, so in this first one, you should have plotted your first point. It would help if I had a pen out. Okay, so that's my x-axis. This is my y-axis. So I have -1, -2, -3, -1, -2, -3, +1, +2, +3. Same thing over here. I'm plotting my first point of -1, -2. I start at the origin, go to the left, -1, and down 2. So that's my first point. And now you have a slope of 1/2, which is equivalent to 2/4, or it's equivalent to 3/6. Again, I want to spread out my dots for a little bit, so I'll use 3/6. So I'm starting at my original point. My rise is 3, so I go up 1, 2, 3 points. And my run is 6, so I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oops. Sorry, ran out of space. So let's use 2, 4 instead. I'll go up 1, 2, and go to the right 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And as you see, all of those dots, when using a ruler, would actually connect. So they're all correct. So you could have had 2 new points of 3, 0. And you also could have had 5, 1. Either would be correct. But that is the graph of your line. So don't overcomplicate this too much. More often than not, you're going to be given the whole equation of the line and just have to fill in some points. Again, with those, use your y-intercept and then an x of 0. But you should do just fine. And we can use the whiteboards in class for you to practice graphing a little bit more. Good luck.